Alright, it's time to hit up another UFC card. This one's UFC on Fox 26, I do believe is the number. Let me double check that. Correct. And this is from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. So, coming north of the border once again. Fairly interesting card, actually. I'm pretty interested in pretty much all of these fights. Having a hard time debating who's going to win most of them. There's maybe three that I'm very certain on, and the rest I could see going both ways. And even some of the ones I'm certain on, the fighters involved are some of the more explosive finishers that could potentially definitely take advantage of any opening. So let's open up with Nordine Taleb versus Danny Roberts. Taleb, not the most physically imposing fighter, a bit low output, but pretty good footwork, good counter game. Very effective Thai kickboxer up against Danny Roberts, who's much more active, higher output, but defensively very, very lacking. His defensive acumen is quite poor. He's open to being hit, and Taleb's got that solid counter game that I talked about before. So I'm going with Nordine Taleb by decision. I think his ability to get some counters in will be a big deal. I think that despite the fact that Roberts will throw more, that Taleb will be the more efficient striker, the more effective striker. And he also has the option to take him down, because Danny Roberts, not the greatest takedown defense on the planet. And Taleb is deceptively a pretty good takedown artist, actually. Jordan Meehan versus Eric Silva. Battle of two very fragile fighters. Meehan in the emotional and confidence mental standpoint. He's kind of broken, just in general. Starts fights broken now, which is not good. And Eric Silva, of course, has always had problems with cardio, and now his chin has kind of left him. So, that makes this an interesting fight, even for two guys who at one point were hyped to do some things. They were both fantastic athletes, came up as exciting fighters, and are now kind of, unfortunately, on the way down and the way out of main competition. I'm going to go with Meehan to win by TKO. I think he can crack Silva's chin. Silva's gotten better at hiding his chin, gotten better at managing his cardio, but still it's a problem. And despite the fact Meehan has his own problems with cardio, but I think it's more that he's mentally kind of just gives up. Silva doesn't really have the style to break him anymore. So I'm going to go with Meehan by TKO. Alessio Di Chirico versus Oluwale Bamboze. Fun name to say. I love that name. Bamboze is a lot of really good physical attributes. Very powerful, very fast, very explosive. Has a very flashy game, but it's not very well put together, not very layered, and very cardio tasking. Di Chirico is not an especially good fighter, really, in any regard. Kind of reasonably well-rounded. Mixed results in the UFC with the losses to Spicely and Veljkovic. You could argue he won the Veljkovic fight, but you could argue that he lost the Gareth McLennan fight. So it goes both ways in that regard. I'm going to go with Di Chirico to win by submission. I see this ending up on the ground at some point. Bamboze is too willing to pursue takedowns at times and end up on the ground in scrambles, and Di Chirico pretty good at those. And as we said, Bamboze is probably the most limited fighter on this card. That doesn't make him the worst, because he's one of the better athletes on the card, but very limited, and that's going to cost him here. John Makdessi, Abel Trujillo. I've been going back and forth on this one. Right now I'm currently on the Makdessi winning by decision hype train on the matter. I did not like what I saw from Trujillo against James Vick. It looked like a broken fighter. It would not be the first time that a fighter has come back from a performance like that and done pretty well, but I do question it. Trujillo seems to be like he's the poster child against Henry Hooft's coaching, because I think Henry Hooft, who is a great technical coach for striking, but his way of cornering and his way of communicating is very much busting you down at all times. And that's fine if you're a hyper-confident guy who has a lot of success in other sports. Kamaru Usman is a good example of this. But when you're able Trujillo, I think it breaks you. And I think he's broken beyond repair at this point. And I think he's now away from Henry Hooft and doesn't even get the good technical side of that. Makdessi's got sharp footwork. Despite his limited reach, he's actually very good at range. Has a very complete toolkit there. Trujillo did not know what to do with James Vick. Granted, Vick is an exceptionally long lightweight and Makdessi is a exceptionally short lightweight in terms of reach. And that's a part of it. But I don't feel I can pick Trujillo against any particularly deep fighter at this point. Going with decision. Tim Elliott versus Petro Menga. This was supposed to be Justin Scoggins before he had some spinal issues. Best wishes to Justin Scoggins. Big fan of him. And hopefully he's okay. But I'm going with Tim Elliott here by decision. Menga he likes to set the pace. He likes to pressure. I don't think that's really the way to beat Tim Elliott. Elliott's going to pressure you back. Going to probably score some takedowns, do some things on the feet. Menga is a very good fighter, actually, but kind of flat-footed. So I see Elliott taking it, but I can see there being some problems as well. Chad Laprise versus Galore Bofando. This is actually a lot like the Chirico Bamboze fight. Now, that being said, Bofando is steps above Bamboze, even though the same problems, I think, are largely apparent. He comes from a traditional martial arts background, does a lot of flashy stuff, very athletic, very explosive, not particularly powerful, though. And, but his biggest win is Charlie Ward, who has physical limitations and not particularly technical. Chad Laprise has physical limitations and is also a small welterweight, but very technical, very, very much so. He's succeeded quite a bit in spite of his physical limitations. I think he's going to be able to pick apart Bofando's not particularly well-structured game. I don't necessarily think he'll be able to finish him because I think Bofando's dangerous enough that you have to be wary and careful when dealing with him. And as a result, this will go to the decision with Chad Laprise picking up the win. Julian Marquez versus Darren Stewart. Marquez fought Phil Haas on the Dana White Looking for a Fight series. Picked up the win. Did a good job against a guy who's very athletic, very good wrestler. Darren Stewart likes to implement that game, but he's not as athletic, not as technical as Phil Haas. I don't think he's as big as Phil Haas either. It truly puzzles me how this guy thought he was going to make a career at 205 because he's small at middleweight. I picked him against Carl Roberson, and it was not a good. It did not help his stock in any way, shape, or form. We'll put it that way. I'm going with Marquez to be able to limit the takedown opportunities of Stewart, who's very raw and not particularly technical in any regard, and then pick him apart a little bit, eventually finish him because he's got good power, and pick up a TKO here. So, Julian Marquez by TKO. Probably second round. Jared Cannonier versus Jan Blachowicz. I'm going with Jared Cannonier on this one. Blachowicz is... He's a low output kind of guy, and Cannonier can beat him in that regard. Cannonier's got good boxing. Defensive wrestling is not great, but Blachowicz is not a particularly fantastic takedown artist in his own right. Not from the area that you would need to be. Like, he's actually a pretty good clinch takedown artist, but his shot is not particularly good. And I think the footwork of Cannonier can keep the range and make him shoot to try and get takedowns. I think he has the better hands. I think he's probably the better grappler. I think he's probably the better athlete. And I think he has probably got the better cardio. So Cannonier by decision should be pretty fun to fight, though. And then in a fight that I don't quite know what to make of. Glover Teixeira, Misha Cirkunov. I am going to go with Cirkunov to win a decision. Even though after the loss to Volkan Oezdemir, I have serious questions about where he is mentally. And the quality of his chin. And the quality of his defensive striking has always been kind of bad. He's kind of rigid, kind of easy to hit. He's very much there to be hit. And Teixeira is still dangerous. Still a good takedown artist. Still a good boxer. But definitely seems like he's falling a little bit off the deep end in terms of the talent, the physical meter. I see Cirkunov being able to time up the clinch and getting some takedowns and working the ground game. But I could easily see Glover picking up a knockout. Santiago, Ponzinibbio, Mike Perry, and what is, to me, the main event of this card. Mike Perry is incredibly exciting, very aggressive. Not a dumb fighter, but a poorly coached one, is how I kind of phrase him. I don't think he's working with the right people to maximize what is considerable physical gifts. He's got great power. His cardio for a guy who throws as hard as he does is fantastic. He's pretty quick, pretty dexterous, has all the physical tools, amazing chin. Has a will to win that is very much up there with the best of all time. But his actual technical game it's pretty limited. It's kind of brawler-esque. I'd say smart brawler is what I'd call him. Ponzinibbio, also very physically gifted, less so than Perry, I would say. And also pretty tough guy, and a guy who has some defensive striking to his name, has a couple of different notes to his game, has the ability to, I think, implement a game plan not tremendously dissimilar to the one that Alan Jouban used to beat Mike Perry. But if he decides to brawl with him and be ultra aggressive, it's probably the most fun combination, but it's also probably the one that leads to Perry winning, because he has the better power and the better chin. But I think I'm going to hope that Santiago Ponzinibbio, who at this point is making a run up the standings or up the rankings to a very high level, is going to be smart about this. And he's going to approach this fight in a smart way, a tactful way, and utilize the extra depth to his game to pick up a decision over Mike Perry. He may not, but the option is there. Ricardo Lamas versus Josh Emmett. This was supposed to be... who is this supposed to be? It was this was Lamas versus... Aldo, of course. And then Aldo got the shot against Holloway when Frankie Edgar got hurt. I am going with Ricardo Lamas in this fight. As much as, despite the fact that it seems like he's a better fighter, I don't think he's necessarily particularly better in many technical areas. I think Emmett's a comparable wrestler. I think Emmett's a comparable boxer. I think Emmett's a comparable grappler. But Ricardo Lamas is ahead of him in terms of the mentality. Emmett fights in a pattern. He's going to do largely the same things over and over again. He's quite predictable, and Lamas is one of the smarter fighters around. He adapts incredibly well on the fly, utilizes things, and this is why he's such a dangerous opportunist, is the word I'll use, where he picks up submissions and knockouts from just very small openings, and that's what he does. And it makes up for, when you consider that this guy is a top 5 featherweight and has been for some time, it's a bit weird to think that his toolkit is... It's not that shiny. It's not that shiny and impressive on a technical level. It's just incredibly well put together with his mental game. I'm picking him by decision because I don't think he finishes Emmett, but I think he dominates the key moments of the fight and eventually finds the pattern to Emmett and takes over late in the fight. Robbie Lawler versus Rafael dos Anjos. I'm very interested in this fight. I'm very interested in any Robbie Lawler fight, frankly. Robbie Lawler... we're talking about probably the better striker, although Dos Anjos is a quality kickboxer as well. Dos Anjos is going to probably want to use the clinch to get takedowns and stuff, but we kind of forget that Lawler's been pretty good at shutting people down in the clinch when he's wanted to. That's the problem with Robbie Lawler, is that you never really know where his head is at. I mean, we're talking about a guy who stuffed Johnny Hendricks' takedowns and Rory McDonald, gets taken down by Donald Cerrone, a guy who got completely his butt kicked by having no concept of checking leg kicks by Melvin Manhoff. And that makes this incredibly interesting. I'm going with Lawler by a late TKO, 3rd round, maybe 4th, because I still have reservations about how well Dos Anjos' game can function at 170. And the 2 fights he's had against Tarek Safadine and Neil Magny haven't really convinced me that the problem of size is not there, because he is a guy who, while very big at 155, his success really came from the fact that he was able to kind of bully people, and I'm not entirely certain he's going to be able to do that at 170. And until, this is a fight that could convince me on that regard, but it's something I think I need to be convinced of before I'm willing to take it for granted. I mean, in fairness, I thought that he would have a hard time to clinch with Tarek Saffiedine, and that was not the case. So it's not like he has not proven me wrong before. But I'm going with Lawler. Dos Anjos can be knocked out. I mean, we saw the famous Tiger uppercut Jeremy Stephens knocked out. And as much as Jeremy Stephens is an incredibly powerful featherweight and lightweight when he was there, one would have to think that Robbie Lawler has a comparable amount of power. And at some point, we'll be able to get this done. I also have to think that Robbie Lawler is pretty hungry to get back into the title picture at this point. So that is UFC on Fox 26. You can see, like, this is a really good card. I am very interested in pretty much every fight on here. I'm not 100% certain on the winner, other than I really like Tim Elliott's chances against Pietro Menga. I really like Ricardo Lamas' chances against Josh Emmett. But aside from that, these are all very interesting fights. And even those are interesting. I feel comfortable with the pick of who's going to win. So pull up some popcorn, pull up some snacks, and enjoy this fight card. And as per always, quick picks here in the description below, as well as the usual links.